Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast, everybody. John Keir and Austin Davidson. We are being joined today by our good friend of the show and former frequent guest, Jon Goehring from 89.1 The Point. John, how you doing, buddy? Great to have you back.
It's great to be back, John. I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me on. I always know that when I come on Stronger Than Steel, it means it's time for a really exciting divisional battle between our teams.
Sure is, and this might be the most hotly anticipated game between these two teams in quite a long time. A combined record of 8-1 between the two teams. The Browns' only loss coming in the season opener, so these two teams are riding a combined 8 straight wins coming into this game at Heinz Field. And despite the different sort of atmosphere that's going to be at Heinz Field because of the coronavirus protocols, I think there's only like 5,500 people allowed in the stadium. Last week there were just over 4,700, so it's not going to be quite the same as 65, 70,000 people, but I'm sure everyone in attendance is going to be psyched for this game. So obviously Austin and I have been looking a lot at the Steelers this year. There have been some things to like, some things that we want to see better with the team, but ultimately 4-0 is 4-0. I know the Browns started kind of rocky this year, but through 5 games, it looks like there's a huge difference with the way this team is not just playing, but the way they're sort of conducting themselves. And it all starts, it seems to me, at the top with new head coach Kevin Stefanski. In your mind, what has he brought to the table for this team that has been so different from different coaches in the past?
Well, he's brought stability, structure, order, silent leadership by example, and that's something that this team has desperately lacked for, as you said, a very long time. And I'm just, obviously after that first game, that big loss to the Ravens, a blowout loss, a lot of Browns fans thought, oh boy, here we go again. But Stefanski didn't overreact. He didn't brush it off either, but he didn't overreact. And all of a sudden, here we are, little by little, taking it 1 week at a time. That cliche really applying to him and his coaching staff, and that's one thing he did a great job of was building a great coaching staff around him that has individually improved everybody, from the biggest improvement on the offensive line to even improvements defensively in areas where the Browns haven't been competent in like decades. So I'm really excited about his leadership and just the fact that he's brought a bunch of stability to this organization that we've desperately needed.
Well, with that great answer, I wanted to go talk about more of like in-game stuff with more of your players. And would you like to start on defense or offense for your team?
Well, defense wins championships. Let's start there.
All right. So the Browns' safety depth has been put to test since the beginning of camp. I think you could agree with that. With the expected starter Grant Talbot being lost to injury before the season could begin, Carl Joseph being sidelined with a hamstring injury he suffered earlier in the year, and now Ronnie Harrison sidelined for this game with a concussion, forcing Andrew Sendeo and Sheldrick Redwine into starting roles for this game. So luckily for you, the Steelers' deep passing game hasn't connected at all this year. But knowing that fact, how do you feel about your safeties coming in, and how about the rest of your secondary? Speak a little on them.
Well, not good, to put it briefly. I think the secondary was a weaker part of the team coming into the season. I love the Delpit pick, though. I thought he actually fell a little further than expected into that second round of the draft. But I really, I'm concerned with some of these no-name defensive backs from I don't even know where. They just seem to have come from nowhere off the practice squad, and all of a sudden, here you go, start against an explosive offense like the Steelers. I mean, you say they haven't really connected on their deep passing game, but then again, how many weapons does this offense have? And it seems like they turn everybody into a weapon, even if they aren't considered a weapon coming in, like, Mr. Claypool there last week with his 4 touchdowns out of nowhere, and my fantasy opponent happened to start him last week for whatever reason. I don't know why. But that's the concern for this Browns secondary, a poor time to be depleted back there at an already weak point of the team there. Although I do think Redwine has made some improvements over the past few weeks when he's seen some playing time, but not enough to for me to feel confident against this explosive offense.
I think that's fair. The one thing I wanted to touch on is Grant Delpit. Grant Delpit was one of my prospects going into last year. He was such an interesting choice. He had one of the best coverage of any safety I looked at. His tackling was just so worrisome. I think that when he comes back, it should be interesting to see how he plays. But obviously, the Browns wanted to put him in a starting role immediately, so he must have been doing better than I would have thought in his first year because I was worried about his tackling. As for everything else you said, how do you feel about Tavarius Mitchell? That's a guy that I've always kind of liked. How is he playing?
I mean, Mitchell, I thought was best in a special teams kind of role, but then again, Stefanski's whole philosophy, like a lot of coaches now, is that that's where you start and you kind of build your way into a starting role in the offensive or defensive side, especially for a player like that. But he has improved. He has played fairly well, and once again, I think they're pretty shallow back there, and I like you said, I really liked Delpit in coverage, and I personally, like the Browns, wanted to rush him into a starting role too, because that's one area where this team has struggled so much. And the tackling, that's a little bit worrisome. I think the problem with the Browns' missed tackles, though, so often has been the fact that they've given up big gashes in the passing game, and they're kind of chasing people, and obviously that leads to poor tackling. So I think it starts with strong coverage, and then the rest kind of takes care of itself.
Very fair. Something with the Browns that they like to rotate in their players a lot. Like the Steelers do the same. The Steelers rotate their linebackers. Like T.J. Watt isn't out there all the time. Alex Highsmith has actually been getting some playing time. Ola Daney as well. And with that being said, because you were talking about the rotating and earning snaps on defense and stuff like with Tavarius Mitchell, Matt Wilson got injured earlier on in the year in training camp. To hold him out of 2 games, he wasn't able to get a full starting role back even after those 2 games yet because they were worried about him getting re-injured. He only played 27 of the 82 possible snaps against the Cowboys, but now he's back, getting full snaps again, as far as I know. How has the middle linebacker play been?
I really am a fan of Mack Wilson myself. Of course, an Alabama product, I'm always going to be a fan of somebody coming out of a program like that. But the linebacker play in general, has been one of the stronger points of the team. Obviously, you can nitpick with all sorts of missed tackles and stuff, but they've actually helped out a lot in the pass rush. And I really like the defensive philosophy that this coaching staff has brought. That's maximized the ability of these linebackers, and I was a little bit worried about that position coming in, actually, and just the inexperience at the linebacker position. But as you said, Wilson back, that's going to be a really good sign, and especially against a Steelers team with such an explosive passing game, but also you guys like to throw those little screens out of the backfield, and your quarterback likes to move around, and those are all things that you need strong linebacker play to counter. So I'm really looking for a big week from them.
So one thing that's going for you is that the screenplay for the Steelers has not been working whatsoever. It's such a simple play, and the Steelers this year just haven't been able to get it running. Going forward, probably the best part of your defense is your defensive line. Ogunjobi playing at a career year level. Myles Garrett leading the league in 6.5 sacks. How do you feel they're going to fare against the Steelers offensive line, which is pretty solid? They're definitely not the same offensive line that the Browns have seen for the past 3 years. They're now changed up. David DeCastro will not be playing in this game, and but they're still kind of not giving up the sacks still. They've only allowed 6 sacks in the year, which is tied for 4th. So how do you feel about your defensive line going into this game?
I feel good entering this game with the Steelers' offensive line, as you said, a little bit understaffed there. Garrett should be interesting, obviously, just because of the circumstances with him now returning and this being his first action against the Steelers, following obviously a horrible thing that happened last year. So that obviously raises some intrigue. But I'm really glad that the first guy you brought up, even before Garrett, was Larry Ogunjobi. He has been the the rock of this defensive line. I mean, obviously Garrett's the flash and the most talented and just the strongest brute force pass rusher on the edge that there is. But Ogunjobi there in the middle has worked wonders stopping the run and just, as you said, having a career year. And he had a great year last year too. So I look for him surprisingly getting into the pass rush mix. He's more known as that big run stopper there in the middle, but he can rush the passer too and kind of wreak some havoc from the middle. And of course, Garrett oftentimes benefits from his ability to push the middle there by getting a sack there from the edge. But I'm really excited about the way this defensive line is trending, and I think they're probably the strongest position group on this team right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly starts up front. Any weaknesses that this team might have on defense is certainly buoyed a lot by what's happening on the defensive front. And I think that Garrett right now is playing like one of the front runners for the defensive MVP, Defensive Player of the Year award. But I'm glad we had a bit of a conversation here about Ogunjobi. To your point, John, among interior defensive linemen, he is the third best run defense grade of interior defensive linemen that have played a minimum of, I forget the number of snaps. I think it's among guys that have played at least 59 snaps. The only interior guys with higher grades against the run are Jonathan Hankins for the Raiders and Tyson Alualu for the Pittsburgh Steelers, oddly enough. So we got a lot of solid play up the middle with interior guys here, and Ogunjobi's no small part of that. So now, Garrett, as far as the way he's been playing this year, do you know by any chance if he's been lining up mostly on one side, or do you know if the Browns like to move him around?
Well, they like to put him on the weak side, but obviously that depends on matchups. So from what I've seen so far, he's been matching up mostly. I mean, against Prescott, he was rushing him from that top side of the line, but it really just depends on those matchups. I'm not sure where they'll end up putting him this week, but Stefanski likes to rotate, as we've discussed, and I think a lot of Garrett's success, just to touch on your point there about him being in the running for defensive MVP. I mean, I don't take anything away from Myles Garrett and how talented of a pass rusher he is, but you watch a lot of his sacks this season, and so many of them have come from those other interior linemen making plays, most notably Ogunjobi, just collapsing the middle and allowing for him to get to the quarterback from the edge. So I give a ton of credit to this whole line. Obviously, Garrett will get most of the accolades, but I give a ton of credit to this whole defensive line and the coaching for putting him in such a position to have this MVP-like season.
Yeah, it's definitely a group effort. Another guy that gets lost in the shuffle a bit, a guy that's been previously well known for his defensive play, is Sheldon Richardson. I feel like he flies under the radar a bit. He hasn't fallen off. He's still out there, and he's actually second on the team in hurries, according to PFF. But I know that it has been a team effort, but Garrett's returning has certainly been huge because there's only one player within even half of his total as far as quarterback hurries, according to PFF. So he's certainly been a huge part of that defense. And I just wanted to touch on a couple other things regarding the defense, is that I'm kind of surprised at how well the linebackers have been playing as a unit because of the fact that they lost Joe Schobert. I mean, I'd have thought that losing him, I know that there was such a lack of experience that was coming into the team, but former Super Bowl MVP Malcolm Smith has actually been really solid too. He's among those guys. He's one of those guys that kind of was a flash in the pan guy, but so far he's played well too.
And to also touch on that, the Browns have really been rotating all their linebackers. They've been using them all. Like Taki's been getting some playing time as well, and he's done pretty well in his limited time. So just to mirror John's point, it's just that their linebackers were very impressive. I really thought it was going to be a weakness coming into this year for you guys, and especially without oh my gosh, how can I remember his name? I just said it.
Greedy
the middle linebacker that's next to Vincent.
Schobert.
Yeah, with Mac Wilson starting now. Mac Wilson was the guy I was looking for because I'm an idiot. But without Mac Wilson for 2 games, I really thought you were going to struggle on the inside. But because of your defensive line playing in front of them, it's allowed you guys to still be one of the best rushing defenses, ranking 4th in the league in rushing yards given up per game at only 87 per game. So overall, good job for your front 7 unit.
Overall thoughts about your defense, just real quick. You know, they've been solid. They have some holes. I mean, what defense doesn't have holes these days? But how much better do you think they can be? John?
Uh-oh.
Oh, I heard you there. You there, bud? Looks like we're having some technical difficulties here. We'll put a pause on things momentarily here. All right, we have John back on the line here. So, John, I was just going to ask you really quickly, overall about the defense. I know that playing defense in the league this year has been especially tough because there's been such a lack of holding penalties called on offensive linemen, and DPI calls are feeling like they're being called as high as they ever have been. The name of the game is forcing turnovers and getting sacks. I know that there have been weaknesses on the back end for this defense, but how good are they playing in your mind right now, and where is the ceiling for them?
Well, the ceiling is a lot higher than where they've gone. From what I've seen, I mean, they've gotten away with a lot, especially in that secondary, and injuries play a big role back there right now. But even without, I'm not convinced of the experience of that secondary. Just with so many young players, don't get me wrong, I love Ward and Delpit and even Redwine's been playing better as of late, but just the inexperience and the poor tackling has caught up to them. And that's why they've been giving up some big gashing passing plays. As for the front line, though, I mean, the defensive line, and as you guys noted, the linebackers have overachieved this season. I give them a lot of credit for hanging in there. As a unit, they've collectively played much better than in past seasons, although we did have a couple of good years there, even when the whole team as a whole was awful. The defense was strong, but the past couple of seasons, it's taken some steps backward. This season so far, a big step forward, but there is room to grow for sure, especially with a healthy secondary, because right now they're relying so much on getting to the quarterback and forcing him to throw before he wants to, and that has been an issue when the pass rush has worn down, like in that Cowboys game when they sacked Prescott like 4 or 5 times in that first half, and then after that they couldn't get to him, and all of a sudden the Cowboys made a heck of a rally. So it really kind of starts and ends there, and with a healthy and just better secondary in general, there wouldn't be so much pressure on that defensive line to force those earlier throws. So especially in the defending the pass, I think there's a lot of room to grow, but a strong start so far.
Well, if that's all you have to say for the defense, I think we're good to move on to the offense, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So the big thing I want to talk about the offense is your rushing game. And I think a big part of your rushing game has been Wyatt Teller. He's one of the best graded guards ever by PFF through 5 weeks, with an emphasis on how well he is run blocking. So he is out for this game, which, in my opinion, is a big loss. First, who do you think is going to be starting in his place? And do you see the run game being as effective without him while going against one of the best ranked rushing defense? Steelers are currently ranked 2nd in rush yards given up per game, only behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And a big part of that why they're not first, is because they gave a 174-yard run to Miles Sanders last week.
That's right. Yes, and that's the critical matchup coming in, right? But as you said, that Teller loss. Wow. I guess it's supposed to be Chris Hubbard coming in his place and sliding on over there, which should be interesting. And you guys know all about Chris Hubbard, but I think without Teller, that makes a huge difference. That the guard play for the Browns has been off the charts, and I think that's why obviously the rushing attack has been so strong. And it's funny. It's not funny, but it's pretty terrible actually how you've listened to the Fox commentators in the Browns Cowboys game Chubb goes down with an injury in the first quarter, and then all of a sudden Kareem Hunt and just third and fourth Deontay Johnson, all these guys that nobody's ever heard of, comes off the bench and still averages 7-8 yards a carry. And the commentators are like, whoa, this is amazing. The Browns have such a deep running back. You know, they're praising these running backs. And it's like, well, you know, good for them. But hold on. Do you not see right now that this offensive line is just dominating in the trenches, and a lot of that has to do with Wyatt Teller. So without him, going to be some tougher sledding this week, and what a poor time to not have him. I mean, this is a rough week in a lot of ways, and to not have, we talked about the defensive injuries, and then to not have Teller is going to really hurt against, like you said, a very deep defense, and one who's great at stopping the run. Should be maybe top in the league.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a confession. I used to play offensive line when I was growing up in high school, and I love good offensive line play. We've been very spoiled in Pittsburgh to have a lot of good offensive line play over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I, quite frankly, love the way the Browns handled their offensive line this year. I mean, John, last year, I know they had injuries and whatnot, but last year it was a train wreck, was it not last year?
Yeah, last year was rough on the line, and that's why it was like the top priority for Stefanski and his staff coming in. Like, okay, free agency, tackle. You know, that's what we need. Draft, okay, sure, solidify that offensive line, and that's exactly what they did, and I give them a lot of credit for doing that. And we've seen the production as a result, and it's a combination of experience and youth, and that's something that I really like. Obviously, there's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement, especially in pass protection, but even that has been so much better and given Mayfield so much more time to pass, and I really am excited for the line moving forward because I don't see it regressing, and I think it's going to allow that these running backs that we have to make some big steps forward in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe since Stefanski came in, you have the only same starter from last year is just Joel Bitonio, right? Since you have Conklin at left tackle, now you had Wyatt Teller at left guard, and you had J.C. Treader. J.C. Treader started last year, didn't he? Yeah.
He didn't. I don't believe he started the season. He ended up coming in at center. Yeah. And so that's an overlap. But then again, I don't know if it's just the fact that I've never really thought about this. Is it just the fact that we've brought in new offensive linemen to take pressure off of one another, or is it the new coaching? And our offensive line coach is great, and just that whole new culture and system that has allowed Treader and Bitonio to play just exponentially better. I mean, the amount of holding penalties they would each, I guess Treader had a pretty strong season last year overall. Bitonio, okay. But I think they've played so much better, and as a unit, collaboratively, they've just made massive improvements. And again, I just do not know, to be honest with you, if that's the coaching staff or just the idea that, you bring in a new left tackle with a ton of experience in Conklin and things get easier.
Well, if I may, I actually think that it's probably a good bit of both. Because, I mean, let's be honest. The offensive plan last year, Freddie Kitchens, say what you want about him, but he had never been the head coach of a team before. Kevin Stefanski has a lot more experience in that regard. And I think that, I love the way the Browns handled this past offseason. They had a bad year on offense last year. They had the weapons at receiver, but Baker Mayfield struggled. The offensive line struggled. So they basically did a lot that they could to make life easier for him so that he wasn't under siege a lot. So what they did was, they already had the running backs. They had the receivers. They shored up their offensive line. They drafted a tackle with a first-round pick. They got Jack Conklin, who's one of the best run-blocking linemen in the league. And they made a lot of changes to their scheme that involved a lot of play action and things of that nature. And they also got Austin Hooper, who I always thought was a nice under-the-radar addition. And I really like what they've done with the personnel. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that labor on the field, especially with the offensive line. So, I mean, they struggled last year, but you look at all their highest graded offensive players. 4 of their first 5 highest graded players, according to PFF, are offensive linemen. You know, you got Teller, who, by the way, I don't know if it's maintaining this week, but through 4 weeks, he was the highest graded guard in PFF history. So, I mean, he was off the charts. And Jack Conklin has traditionally been one of the best run blocking tackles in the league. Batonio and Treader were playing well. The worst overall graded player is Jedrick Wills, the rookie tackle who had played right tackle in college. So, I mean, can you really fault him for not being perfect in year one with no training, no preseason, limited training camp, and switching positions? I mean, he's been fantastic, all things considered, I think.
Yeah. Again, I'm a really big fan of these Alabama linemen, and that was exactly the pick I wanted them to make. Certainly worth that early first round pick, in my opinion, for Wills. But yeah, I have to say you're exactly right, and the combination of both that you speak of also goes to show just the mix of experience and youth is really what's allowing this line to click, and it's really interesting. I didn't know that about Teller being the highest rated in history. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so at least through 5 weeks, I wasn't sure exactly the parameters of it, but all you really need to know is he's playing really good. So that was basically the point. So let's talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield, because his rookie year was awesome. I mean, he came off the bench. It was a new energized Browns team, and then last year was the complete opposite. He was not good. The walls were closing in around him. This year has been kind of a mixed bag. I mean, he's done some things well. He has had a couple games where he's reverted to his habits from last year. I think you should throw that Ravens game from the season opener out the window, because that was kind of predictable. So, I mean, your evaluation of Baker to this point this year, where is he at in your mind? Because it seems like he's somewhere between last year and 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'd say if we were to make this academic, like B+. I give him credit for a bounce back season, but I try not to give him too much credit because he's had more time to throw this year. He has, though, made sounder decisions, and that's a product of having more time to throw and having so many weapons once again around him, and, of course, new coaching staff, offensive-minded in many ways coaching staff. I give Mayfield a lot of credit, though. You can't take anything away from him just because, you're set up to succeed does not mean that you get no credit for actually taking those steps and succeeding. So I give him a lot of credit with explosive throws deep down the field. I mean, he's finally using Beckham a little bit more. It seems like Landry's been his favorite target over the years, but over these past couple of years. But he's using Beckham more, allowing the explosive speed on both ends to be used to his advantage. Of course, he has more time to throw, but he's also, when he doesn't have as much time to throw, in those rare instances, he's been checking down much better, whether it be to Chubb out of the backfield or a tight end like Cooper has had some big receptions in the red zone. So I evaluate Mayfield as a much more disciplined and a much smarter quarterback, and that's the reason, one of the many reasons this team is thriving so far.
I'm going to throw a couple PFF stats at you, and I want you to react to them, because I believe that I want to see whether you think all right, that's kind of in line with what I'm thinking. So last year Mayfield struggled across the board, whether he was under pressure or he had a clean pocket. This year, when he's been kept clean, he's a little better than league average when he's been kept clean. His passer rating is 109.2, which is actually, I think, 14th or 15th in the league, but it's still, that's a number that's solid. You want that to be better. When he's under pressure, that number drops to 30.9, which is the second worst among 32 quarterbacks. So a key to that is blitzing. When he's not blitzed, his passer rating is 94.2, and when he is blitzed, it's dropped to 76.1. So according to the stats, if he is not blitzed and he's kept clean, he's really good. If you blitz him and you get pressure on him, he struggles more than the average quarterback. Is that kind of what you're thinking right now?
Absolutely. That's used to, and And I mean, that's the case with a lot of quarterbacks, I think, in the NFL, especially quarterbacks like him who like to get out of the pocket and escape. But I think that's right in line with what I would say.
So I know that I'm going to try to go off what Austin has prepared here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of grab what he prepared here. So, the explosive play is, other than turnovers, the most impactful play that you can have in the sport. So the Steelers' defense, while it was elite last year, it still does a lot of things really well, puts pressure on the quarterback. It has stopped the run pretty well. But one thing it has been susceptible to is explosive plays. It's been giving up a lot of explosive plays through the passing game, and only one explosive play in the running game, but that was a touchdown to Miles Sanders last week. How do you feel about the Browns' ability to connect on big plays? I know they have probably the league's most dangerous rushing attack, in my opinion, even without Nick Chubb right now. So how do you feel about the Browns' ability to possibly run the ball? And if they have to throw, how do you feel about their ability to possibly get explosive plays through the passing game?
Really good. I like the passing attack, but it starts by establishing the run, and that's what that's going to be the real litmus test early on is how does this line fare up against that Steelers front seven, and the rushing attack. No matter who the running back is, I don't care who the running back is. Nick Chubb is our best running back, but Kareem Hunt can do the same sorts of things. So it's going to depend on that, and that'll open up the passing game, because that's just how football works, and especially how this Browns team is structured. Good defense, though, in the Steelers, and especially against the run, that scares me.
You have anything further to ask, Austin?
So, what is a matchup that you're watching in this game? Is it going to be Kareem Hunt versus the middle linebackers, or is it going to be one of the wide receivers versus the cornerbacks? Or what's a matchup you're looking for in this game that you think the Browns can exploit?
John, could you
definitely?
I was just going to say, could you do one on both sides? Because I'd like to hear one matchup on both sides of the ball, if you don't mind.
Sure. I got to go in a couple minutes, guys. I'm sorry. But yeah, no, absolutely. One matchup offensively, got Kareem Hunt. I love that matchup against the Steelers linebackers, and out of the backfield, those running backs making big catches. That's going to be key, and that kind of keeps the defense on their heels, right? And then, John, you were saying on the defensive side of the ball.
Yes, sir.
On the defensive side, well, I hate to say it, but Ogunjobi and Garrett and Richardson up against the Steelers O-line is a matchup that really, I think, plays into our favor. So I'm really looking forward to that matchup. But again, the Steelers offensive line, so deep and so strong. So it really should be interesting to see what happens there.
All right. We won't take up any more of your time, John. Just real quickly, your final thoughts on the game and a final score prediction. That's what we want to hear.
Browns secondary just too depleted right now, so I would say give me the Steelers 27-20 in a tight battle.
Wow. All right. Well, that was Jon Goehring from 89.1 The Point, our friend and good guest of the show. John, we always appreciate having you on, and we'll be happy to have you on again later this year. So thank you as always, and stay safe and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Sounds good, guys. Don't enjoy it too much, though. Have a good one.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Take care, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.